Okay, so let's transition onwards now to when and where to look for jobs. The question we get most at Covalent Careers is, when should I start looking for jobs? And people want like this finite timeline, right? They want to know how many months before, when, what's this magic number? I don't think there's a magic number, but what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think you should do what I did and wait until you graduate to start looking for jobs, because then it becomes very difficult. Then what can ultimately happen is you find that it is June, it's July, and you still don't have a job, or you might only have 1 day a week working somewhere, and you start to panic a little bit because the student loans start knocking on your door. So if I had to answer that question, I would say you should start looking for jobs as soon as you're in school. And that can take on a variety of forms. You know, when you're in first year, you're not really thinking about jobs. You're thinking about, oh, I need to pass this test, or I need to take this assessment, or so there's other things filling your mind, but you should always be thinking about what you're going to do, where you want to work, who you might want to work for by the time you graduate.
Yep.
If you have a head start, it's better, but one way or another, start as soon as you can, even if you haven't graduated yet, because in your experience, do you feel that employers, when they're connecting with students, say who have not yet graduated, is that a deterrent in the hiring process? Will they say, oh, you haven't graduated yet, I'm not interested in your application, your resume?
Not at all. So at Covalent Careers, I think we've been in business a little over 2 years, 3 years or something. We've helped about 4,000 practices hire last time I checked the number. And I would say I talked to a bunch of those employers or look at their job descriptions, and they're all very welcoming to accepting candidates passively, meaning building relationships early. We are training these employers to say, look, hiring is difficult. It's a tight market. Tight market means there's more supply of practices, right, than there is supply of ODs. So, right, you are in demand. And so we say you need to start early. You need to talk with people who may not be ready to accept the position in 6 months or a year. Keep your options open. Because a lot of times employers will post a job and they'll go, oh my God, I'm going on to month 3. I'm going on to month 4. I'm going on to month 6. Why is this happening? And we said, well, if you would have started 6 months ago and just, you know, been open to the right candidate, this wouldn't be an issue. And so we are now in a market where you have to start early, and starting early is welcomed. So even starting at the end of your 3rd year to get aggressive about when and where and the whole thing is perfectly acceptable. If that market ever flip-flops, then that would be a bit of a different story, and you can start later.
Yeah, great. So now that we've identified when to start looking for jobs, I think it's important to discuss where do you start looking for jobs? Where do you start applying? What resources are you using? And there's a lot more resources now than there was when we were graduating. Covalent Careers didn't exist back then. So things were a lot more challenging for us, but the current generation of optometry students has a lot more to work with. So what are some of the top resources that you recommend?
Great question. So look, Covalent Careers is a career development company for new healthcare professionals, for new optometrists, and we help you with job placements, education, and mentorship. So of course I'm going to plug our own platform, but look, I mean, join it, do what you've got to do, but you need to be looking everywhere. My number one tip, how I found my position, was networking. So that's going to be at the top of my list, even if it means that you don't get to find a job through Covalent Careers. Or you could just network with me and I could help you find that job. But look, there's Indeed, ZipRecruiter, Covalent Careers, Local Eyesight, Eyecare Optometry. There's a million other niche ones. There's state associations, the AOA's Career Center. Look everywhere. There's no reason not to look everywhere. Go to your local CE meetings, talk, introduce yourself to people, see what's out there. Finding the position is easy as looking for what you like and clicking the apply button and getting ready for the interview, which we'll talk about next. So that's, I think, the easy part. I don't really know how much there is other than just be active, look everywhere.
And put yourself out there.
Yeah. I think Covalent Careers offers a unique advantage in that we do stuff like this. So we tend to be lately, we're a little bit on the cutting edge. We're attracting a lot of employers and a lot of job seekers because of some of this great content and resources. Also, if you go on the site, you'll see we're this ecosystem of jobs, companies, and content. And so we come to market in a little bit of a different way than just a job board.
Yeah, and if there's one piece of advice I can share with everybody watching, it would be that even if there's an opportunity to work even 1 day a week and you know, I'm sure we're all looking for full-time right away. But even if it's 1 day a week in the beginning, don't be afraid to apply for that job, because that could very well lead into a full-time job very quickly. And that's kind of the situation I was in. I found a job, it was for just Saturdays, and I went in, I interviewed, did really well in the interview. We'll talk about this coming up here soon. But within a month, they offered me another day. Within 3 months, full-time. So don't count anything out.
That's awesome. And that's a really common way that happens. I was mentoring a candidate who called in the other day for some career support and mentorship, and she was working at 3 different practices. She discounted one of them as a partnership opportunity. She was focusing on the other 2, and a week later she called me back and said, everything's changed. Now we're looking at partnership opportunities with the one I didn't think was gonna happen. So it's fast moving. You really gotta be ready for anything, and being, you know, we can get into reputation and, you know, your word is bond and all stuff like that, and perhaps in a different exercise.
Yeah. So I think we should talk about resumes next. And everyone more or less has a resume, but we get the question a lot, what is the major difference between resume and CV? And which one is more applicable to optometry?
Yep. So great question. The difference between a resume and CV to me is a resume is just a bit more to the point. It's very straightforward, typically 1 page, and it really just highlights the main things you need to get across, while a CV is just this more long form of all of your accomplishments. It tends to grow with you throughout your career, and it can include things that aren't necessarily 100% applicable to a job, maybe more applicable to things like speaking or consulting opportunities, things like that. Any tips on that? We typically just see resumes come through when it comes to job applications.
Yeah, I would say that resumes are definitely the more popular avenue or strategy for job applying. And one question we get all the time is, geez, you know, I'm just graduating, I don't have that much to put on my resume. What should I put on this? And just starting out, just keep it simple. Just a list of your clinical externships. Maybe you've done a residency, you want to put that in there. But keep it general, keep it basic, because at the end of the day, I found that a resume is just really the stepping stone to the more important part of the job process, and that is the interview.
Yep.
Because most employers are going to want to get to know you.
Yep.
Your resume tells them a lot less about you than meeting you in person.
Yep. So some do's and don'ts on the resume are things to include. Personally on mine, I had a very short or quick statement about my main value proposition, what was unique about me. I made sure that this one thing really stood out compared to what other people might have on there. Otherwise, it was school experience and things I did within school, clubs or associations that I was part of. Then I had a highlight of my clinical experience, but it was very critical to make sure it stood out or seemed different than others. And I would tailor it if I was applying to a job that had a lot of focus on ocular disease or a lot of focus on specialty contact lens. I would try to flex that muscle on that resume by changing out some bullet points and things like that. The main thing, or my main #1 tip in a resume, is to have statements in there that ultimately speak to what you are going to do or the value you are going to drive for that practice. So I've looked at a lot of resumes and they all look the same. But on a great resume, I see things like, and this isn't just applicable to a private practice, this could be for a corporate opportunity, driving revenue, building patient base, bringing in new modalities, helping bottom line margins, improving efficiencies, helping to train staff, transitioning to new medical records or bringing in new software, bringing in new equipment. So it's those things, because these are small businesses you're joining. Yep. Let's remove corporate opportunities for a moment. Let's say private practice. These are small businesses, mom and pop shops, maybe a little bit bigger, but all of them are thinking, yes, they want to help patients, that's important, but they want to grow, they want to expand locations, they want to bring in more patients, they want to grow their business. So how is your resume not going to speak to that? You're a doctor, of course you're going to be able to see patients, of course you're going to deliver great clinical care, but what can you do from a business standpoint? And if you're not that person, don't include that. That's not you. That goes back to the whole goal thing. Find a practice that doesn't need you to generate new revenue or whatever. And even in the corporate modalities, I think speaking to those things, they would love to see that. They too are focused on bottom line. So don't feel that that is selfish or greedy or capitalistic or something. Just, you are helping to grow that business. A couple of lines about that will set you apart. My other resume tip would be to don't make it fancy. Like, very simple. Google Docs, I personally like. You can develop multiple copies of your resume. Don't worry about all sorts of column formatting. Just keep it plain, simple. Really, folks don't look at your resume for too long anyway. It's kind of a quick glance. They'll skim it. Yep.
Yeah.
So keep it simple, keep it editable. Don't do different colors and
You
stuff.
need to put your picture on there, your photo. In fact, you really shouldn't put your photo on there.
Yep, agreed. So simple and to the point. Another really helpful tip for resumes would be to speak to things outside of clinical care, and that would be marketing and advertising, growing the patient base through different means, helping out around the office, things that help the practice grow that aren't related directly to seeing a patient. Once again, if that's not you, don't put it. If you are open to those things and helping the practice grow, that it will stand out big time and be a great, or dialogue point. It'll make you look different. When I applied to one of my positions, it was a very competitive position at a great practice out in San Diego, and this was a little bit later after the resume stage, but I developed this kind of hybrid business plan. I researched the practice. I had talked with the doc a couple times, and I just put together in a small little binder, maybe 10 pages or so, about what I thought would help the practice grow. So I spoke to the main clinical modalities I wanted to bring in, the potential costs to bring them in, but also what we would anticipate in terms of revenue. I talked a little bit about the competition in the area, what other practices were doing, where the opportunities were, and ultimately this small kind of hybrid business plan, it absolutely secured the opportunity for me. All right, so that ends this first part of the workshop. Move on to the next video where we're going to talk about interviewing.